Mr.
Major
Speaker.
Delin.
May we recognize the gentleman from the 1st District of Davao del Sur, the Honorable Marc Cagas.
The Honorable Marc Cagas is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. With all due respect to my good friend, the Honorable Tiangco, may I just put on record that in this House of the People, Mr. Speaker, there is indeed a minority. And in the order of things, it is a tradition and a practice that members of the minority are given the first crack in asking questions or interpolating the budget of different agencies and departments of government. I just want to put that on record, Mr. Speaker, because I don't want to get the feeling that we are fast-tracking anything here, Mr. Speaker, especially the budget deliberations.
The manifestation is duly noted.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm going now to my questions as far as the MMDA is concerned.
You may proceed, please.
Thank you. Mr. Speaker, distinguished sponsor, I'm not really from Metro Manila, but I'm interested to ask questions on the budget of the MMDA because according to this book, which I have now, which we all have, there is significant, huge amount of money is involved. Maybe bigger than the one allocated for your district in Cebu City, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, distinguished sponsor, under locally funded projects, specifically item B of locally funded projects, there is a provision, flood control and drainage projects for national capital regions. In Pasig, for example, Pasig has been allocated a total of 2 billion pesos. Am I correct, Mr. Speaker?
Million, Mr.
Million.
Speaker.
2 million?
Yes, Mr. Speaker.
I'm speechless, Mr. Speaker, because during Undoy, Pasig City was one of the cities terribly undoyed. In fact, the gentleman from Pasig could not even leave his house in Valle Verde to go to his constituents because his car could not pass through the floods, Mr. Speaker. And yet, are we saying this afternoon that for Pasig, we are only allocating 2 million pesos for flood control and drainage system, Mr. Speaker? Am I correct, distinguished sponsor?
Yes, Mr. Speaker, Your Honor. You're very correct.
All right. Granting that this is correct, to correlate, Mr. Speaker, may I first ask, is there an interagency, Mr. Speaker, coordination between the MMDA, the DPWH, or the DND under the National Disaster? There's a new term for NDCC, I'm not really sure. National Disaster. Yes, the good general knows that. Is there a coordination amongst the three agencies, Mr. Speaker?
Yes, we have, Mr. Speaker, but the MMDA is the lead agency Mr. Speaker.
Interesting. What then, Mr. Speaker? Please inform me, because this representation is not privy or doesn't have any knowledge as to the mandate of the MMDA. What is then the general mandate of the MMDA as far as cities or areas covered by the Metropolitan Development Authority, Mr. Speaker?
Mr. Speaker, was created by virtue of Republic Act Republic Act 7924 dated March 1 of 1995, whereby there are several services which the MMDA is mandated to perform. And among the services enumerated, there are three major functions, Mr. Speaker. This is, number one, the transport and traffic management. Second is the solid waste disposal and management. And third, the flood control and sewerage management, Mr. Speaker, among several others.
GAB or in the NEP, just for informative purposes, maybe Cecil and the other ladies, beautiful ladies from the Appropriations Committee, could inform members of Congress, especially from the NCR, whether or not, like for example in Pasig 2 million, whether or not there are other provisions over and above the 2 million budget for flood control and drainage for Pasig, Mr. Speaker.
We will do that, Mr. Speaker.
Well, I suggest one of the guys or girls from the APRO committee furnish in a few minutes the members of Congress who are from NCR who were badly hit during the Ondoy, so that we will be aware as to how much allocation they will be receiving from MMDA. My next question, Mr. Chairman, are the local government units found within the ambit of the MMDA contributing any revenue or money to the MMDA as an authority?
Percent of their era is automatically appropriated as contribution to the MMDA funding, Mr. Speaker.
Hear these two words during this budget deliberations, Mr. Speaker. As far as MMDA is concerned, what is automatically appropriated? What do we mean by automatically appropriated when it comes to MMDA, Mr. Speaker?
It is appropriated by virtue of a law, Mr. Speaker.
In other words, Congress need not pass an enabling law because there is already a law which predetermine a predetermined purpose. Am I correct, Mr. Speaker?
This is provided under Republic Act 7924.
79-24, passed on 1995. Am I correct?
Yes,
Mr.
Your Honor.
Speaker. Mr. Speaker, based on the GAB, I do not see any more provision for flood control and drainage projects for the city of Pasig. May the chairman of the MMDA, through the distinguished sponsor, inform this representation whether the chairman of the MMDA is aware if there are DPWH-funded projects regarding flood control and drainage projects for the city of Pasig, Mr. Speaker.
We have a foreign-assisted project for the Masig Marikina River Channel improvement, Mr. Speaker, in the amount of 1.162 billion, Mr. Speaker.
And River Basin. And Mr. Speaker, may I know what is the status of this project? Meaning, did the foreign funding come in already, Mr. Speaker?
Project, Mr. Speaker, but undertaken by the Department of Public Works and Highways, Mr. Speaker.
So under the MMDA, notwithstanding the fact that Pasig City, based on RA 7924, as part of the automatically appropriated allocation, only received a meager 2 million pesos, Mr. Speaker. Am I correct in saying that, Mr. Speaker?
The 2 million peso allocation, Mr. Speaker, out of the capital outlay for flood control management, Mr. Speaker, is an annual allocation that is actually distributed evenly, almost evenly, throughout all the legislative districts in Metro Manila. The total allocation out of this capital outlay for Metro Manila is 58 million, Mr. Speaker. But there are other activities undertaken by the MMDA pursuant to their function on flood management, flood control management, Mr. Speaker. That is incorporated under the MOOE, Mr. Speaker.
Caloocan, etc., were allocated 2 million peso each. Mr. Speaker, you know, MMDA has puzzled me since before. Not necessarily because Bayani Fernando became the chairman of the MMDA, no. What puzzles me, Mr. Chairman, Mr. Speaker, is that why is MMDA receiving for this year a total amount of, I'm sorry, I don't have a calculator, but how much is the MMDA receiving total for this proposed 2011 budget, Mr. Speaker?
980 million, Mr. Speaker, from the national government.
Yes.
That is the subsidy.
980 million pesos. And the 5% is already included in this 900 million, Mr. Speaker?
Excluding, Mr. Speaker.
Excluding! This puzzles me even more, Mr. Speaker. You know why, Mr. Speaker? My next question is the MMDA a local government unit, Mr. Speaker?
Technically, no, Mr. Speaker. It is a special administrative region or office.
So MMDA is not a local government unit which can legally receive or which under the law has an era like Tagaytay City, for example, Mr. Speaker?
It is treated like a province, Mr. Speaker, whereby it undertakes services that concerns Metro Manila, the whole Metro Manila area, services that transcends political boundaries, Mr. Speaker. So that's why in order to coordinate and provide these services, considering the area in terms of socio-economic in the socio-economic spheres, Mr. Speaker. So that's why there is a need to create this special administrative body in order to implement those services which affects all government units in the area, Mr. Speaker.
Are we, Speaker, that the different mayors of Metro Manila are incapable of handling the respective jurisdictions, Mr. Speaker? Like, for example, the Honorable Toby Chanco, the former mayor himself. Are we saying that he's incapable of taking care of his own city, Mr. Speaker?
There are certain basic services affecting or involving the whole Metro Manila area, Mr. Speaker, that cannot be actually effectively handled by the local government units by reason of their meager fundings, Mr. Speaker. But the autonomy of the local government units, Mr. Speaker, is not prejudiced, Mr. Speaker.
I am grateful that the autonomy of the different cities are not affected. However, what affects me or troubles me, Mr. Speaker, is that if the MMDA is not a local government unit, then what would be the basis for MMDA receiving an IRA or an internal revenue allotment? Because, Mr. Speaker, it is easily observable that cities within the NCR compared to cities found in, let's say, in Mindanao or some parts of the Visayas are definitely well off and therefore well funded. So my question, Mr. Speaker, why then is MMDA receiving internal revenue allotment, Mr. Speaker?
The Republic Act 7924. It is provided, Mr. Speaker, that the internal revenue allocation for MMA, then MMA, continues to be, is transferred already to the MMDA. So that's why it is by law, Mr. Speaker, that provides for the legality of the funding that out of the IRA, as IRA, Mr. Speaker, for MMDA.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Our colleague from the Lone District of Camiguin, where I also come from, has filed a bill which would amend and delete the same. Because MMDA is a mere authority. And therefore, it is not an LGU. And hence, why should it be receiving IRA? And here we come, here we are in Congress during budget deliberations saying that by virtue of 7924, each city is automatically remitting 5% of its IRA to the MMDA, and yet cities like Marikina and Pasig is getting only 2 million pesos per year. Don't we think, Mr. Speaker, that the same is unjust as for the LGUs concerned, Mr. Speaker?
Mr. Speaker, with all due respect, what Pasig, the city of Pasig is receiving is only 2 million pesos out of the total budget allocation of the MMDA. There are services rendered by MMDA which also serve the city of Pasig. Like, for example, the traffic and transport management, which does not only serve a particular local government unit, but it serves, in fact, not only Metro Manila, but also the whole country, Mr. Speaker. The the solid waste management function, Mr. Speaker. there is a huge amount allocated out of the MMDA funds for payment of tipping charges, which accommodates all the garbage all over Metro Manila, Mr. Speaker. So it is not entirely correct that, it's not even correct to say that what is that 2 million pesos only is what Pasig City has been receiving from MMDA.
Thank you. I guess indicated here. So, Mr. Speaker, my point is, if cities within the NCR are contributing 5% of their ERA, it is just well and proper that more services and projects should be given or allocated to the congressional districts found in NCR, especially those cities and areas which are flood prone, Mr. Speaker, because we cannot afford to have another Ondoy happen in this country. And I'm even happy that the D&D family is here, because they too have responsibility as far as national or natural disasters are concerned, Mr. Speaker. I'm about to wind up. I'm just intrigued. During the time of Chairman Bayani Fernando, the color of footbridges and everything, kahit ano, no? Footbridge, kung anong meron man yung MDA, urinal, kung ano-ano pa. What was the color, Mr. Chairman, Mr. Speaker?
Pink.
Pink. Interestingly, during elections, there were instances when I go to Manila from my province, I saw that it was being repainted to green, Mr. Speaker. And has the repainting continued up to this day, Mr. Speaker, of all structures of the MMDA metro-wide, Mr. Speaker?
At present, Mr. Speaker, there is no specific color for all, let's say, MMDA facilities, Mr. Speaker.
No.
What happened before the present administration took over is that the interim chairman was the one actually introducing, who introduced the color of the different facilities, Mr. Speaker. But for purposes of beautification, landscaping, and everything, the MMDA, but with no specific color, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Olor. The question that I was really trying to point out is that are there repainting jobs still pending or ongoing up to this very day, Mr. Speaker?
Yes, Mr. Speaker, because that is also part of the maintenance activity for the different facilities of MMDA, Mr. Speaker.
And how much did it cost the MMDA to repaint everything pink to everything green, Mr. Speaker?
Very minimal, Mr. Speaker. Around siguro mga 1 or 2 million? 1 million, Mr. Speaker.
So, the current MMDA administration has no specific data as far as the how much we spend or the MMDA spends for repainting, Mr. Speaker?
The painting activity, Mr. Speaker, happened during the time of Chairman Innocentes. And so, we will give you the data, Mr. Speaker, if you need it, Mr. Speaker.
granting, no? It's obvious that we have the new MMDA chair, but isn't it the job also of the present MMDA chair or the present MMDA family to also know the historical expenses of their agencies and department? Because after all, you come here to Congress and ask for a total of 900 million pesos. So, the point, Mr. Speaker, is that, you know, I don't mind what color the MMDA paints, whether it is pink, black, yellow, violet, or tangerine, the color of ERAP. It would have been okay with me. My only concern, Mr. Speaker, is that was there a necessity to totally scrap out the color pink, Mr. Speaker? I'm not even referring to Bayani Fernando anymore. In other words, kailangan bang gastusan talaga yun? Kasi kung kailangan gastusan yun, marami pang mga cities at munisipyo sa mga probinsya ang nangangailangan ng pondo. So if we waste money on just because we're mad at Bayani kasi color pink, I don't think it's justifiable, Mr. Speaker.
Mr. Speaker, actually, it is an activity conducted by the labor component of which is supplied by the administration. And the materials spent for it is 1 million. This is not actually for the purpose of replacing the color pink with whatever color, Mr. Speaker. But this is a maintenance activity of the MMDA to preserve the facilities of the MMDA, Mr. Speaker.
That, you know, I pass through Commonwealth Avenue every day, and I saw that there was really no need to repaint the footbridges along Commonwealth Avenue, as well as other footbridges. The point of this representation, Mr. Speaker, is that even if we say that it's just 1 million pesos, but 1 million pesos for a family badly affected by Undoy is already too much money, Mr. Speaker. So, you know, Mr. Speaker, if we relate ourselves to rural areas, hindi natin pwede sabihin na 1 million, malit lang yun. What if, for example, I'm a mayor of a 6th-class municipality, then that 1 million spent for a repainting, which is totally unnecessary, Mr. Speaker, is already a huge amount, Mr. Speaker. So, in other words, the point that I'm stressing here, if we do not need to repaint anything, if it's not part of the beautification or the maintenance, if the paint is still good, and if it's still clean, then we need not spend money, Mr. Speaker. Because, you know, I'm just basing my arguments on the President's message that this is a reformist budget, and we are gearing towards the righteous path, which in Tagalog means matuwid na daan, Mr. Speaker. With that, Mr. Speaker, I thank the distinguished sponsor of the budget for the MMDA for intelligently answering my questions. I hope that this representation has sent a message to the MMDA that there are 6th-class municipalities in other areas of the province that also need money, Mr. Speaker. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Thank you very much, Mr. Majority Leader. And thank you very much, Mr. Distinguished Sponsor.
Majority Leader.
Mr. Speaker, may